Back again, and hello to all of you who've come. So the next round table, the subject is the challenge and the necessity for fluid omni-channel approach or multi-channel approach, presented by Olivier, who's the CPO of PrestaShop. So Pierre-Olivier, you've got the floor. Hello to everyone. Thank you, Asman. I'm very happy to be here with you today to participate in my first PrestaShop day. I've heard a lot about it, and today it's finally become reality. I'm happy to be with you today to talk about omni-channel and fluidity. And is Pierre, hello everyone, and then François Leviton, who's the manager and director in Google. Hello, François. Hello to everyone. And so get yourselves comfortable and just introduce yourself to the people who are listening in. And there are a lot of people online. I'll start. Uh, yeah, I work in IDN. It's a payment solution for upfronts and multi-channel as well. And so I think we'll be able to talk about the subject quite well. And François Leviton, I'm managing director in Google, which is a small startup, which is and I work with brand ecosystems and traders in France. So I'm happy to welcome you here and host you here today to talk to you, like Alexander said this morning, about the challenges and the realities of omni-channels or multi-channels in the PrestaShop product day, and I already talked about this in June. This is now the current standard in commerce today in different ways, but there are two significant elements that I'd like to introduce to kick off this roundtable. The first is that from a qualitative point of view, the consumers, who we all are, and they like omni-channel commerce in all its forms, and about 90% of consumers want an omni-channel type of commerce. And this is just for the quality point of view. Now, for the quantitative point of view, the number of average points of contact during the purchase of an article, which in 15 years has gone from 2 points of contact to 6 points of contacts. 15 years ago when you bought an article, you had 2 contact points. And there was a great variety of people, but there were actually only 2, and now there's an average of 6. So omni-channel, multi-channel has become a reality. This is the commerce of today. And fluidity in this omni-channel approach is the big challenge here, and this is what we're going to try to talk about today together. And before that, I just wanted to say that, of course, the role of commerce today is to have this multi-channel approach and to offer consumers this multi-channel experience that they can sort of like that they can change, that you can have varied channels and mix all these channels together in the different phases, and in order to be able to give the customer a proper experience when they're shopping. So with this omni-channel approach, it's got to be fluid. What does that mean? It means that behind all this, in the omni-channel experience for a consumer, you've got a certain amount of different things and problems that you have, and irritating factors that you have, so it's very important for the trader to have, or the merchant to have, extreme flexibility and fluidity, and you've got to have as well a coherency between the products, the sales or promotional issues, how you can have a personalized communication as well, wherever I am, in social media and emails and the boutique, and how finally me as an individual, I'm acknowledged and recognized in each of these contact points when I go into a shop, and I've bought online before. How can I not treated like a new client, but I'm treated like somebody who knows the brand, even if the person has never met me before. So these are all these little things and all these expectations, which means that we're trying to smooth out this experience as much as possible and make it as fluid as possible. So the secret behind all of this is data. It's like always how you can use unified data, and this is a wide concept. It's behaviorable. It's also with respect to the product, and it's also all the information which describe my customer experience with the brand as a consumer, and how finally And we can use this. How can we make this commercial experience a lot more fluid? So with Francois and Pierre, we're going to try and give you a certain number of insights into this in order to develop and fluidify this omni-channel experience as much as possible. So I'd like to start with the first thing. Why do we talk about irritating factors or snags? And what can you tell the people listening in? What are the snags that you can encounter when during a consumer experience, and finally, what solutions do you have to to get rid of these snags? So I'll start, Pierre. So it's a really good question, and I think we talk about a lot of retail brand retailers who are multi-channel or omni-channel. Historically, there was a lack of innovation. There were actors who were working on certain channels, and I think omni-channel has really become the new normal. And I think we could even go further with unified commerce and the possibility of recognizing the same customer in all the sales channels. And I think that this is really helping the merchants to improve customer experience. We all know what the snags are, problems and the different snags, we all know them, problems in the boutique, problems with stocks, having to queue up. This is the physical part. And with e-commerce or whatever, it's also if it's gonna fit, is it easy to give back if it doesn't? Sort of like, how do I pay and how do I get reimbursed? And this is an irritating factor as well. And so the payment experience as well has to be as good as possible. And we've got a little experience with 3D Secure, which has become obligatory. It's a new additional step. How to make sure that it's how to make sure that it's as pleasant as possible for the retailer and also for the consumer. But before we talk about the irritating factors, let's talk as well about the what we can measure on our platforms here. This platform with more than 1 billion users in the world. And we look at the behavior, YouTube, Google, and everything. The first thing that you see is that the 2 years that we've just experienced with COVID and the pandemic in the world, we already said it in the press as well, so I'm not giving you any surprises here, but it's really accelerated the phenomenon. We didn't see new behavior emerge. The behavior that we've experienced today was already there, but it was an embryonic state, but it's accelerated depending, sort of like it's accelerated by 3 to 5 years in 1 year. So it's really a spring forward. And what did we see first? The first thing that we saw was the acceleration of e-commerce, the acceleration of online buying with growth in France, which was 2 to 3 figures. And what we talked about less was growth of what you'd call multi-channel or omni-channel, and the behavior of consumers with their mobile telephone and a computer, and they spend a lot of hours in front of their computer, and a massive displaced use from physical to digital, where they would have gone shopping before. They're now doing it online. So that's the first point that I just wanted to raise. That in got an interesting study which was done in pure e-commerce, but it can be transposed into multi-channel. What are customer expectations? What do they want? And how do they choose to buy brand A or brand B, for example? And this study showed something really important, was that the behavior of users, sort of like I intend to buy a product, like say, for example, I'm going to buy an iPhone, but before that, I'm going to associate with this product a preferred merchant. And this is what's important here. This is where the friction is, because this is the merchant that I had the best experience with. And this is important because this means that afterwards everything's linked up with respect to this first contact. So I've got to go on the site of my preferred merchant or my favorite merchant, and I'm going to challenge the proposition of this merchant by going to consult sort of like alternative offers. And these are the touch points that you see, which are much more frequent today. Sort of like I've got to go look for videos, I've got to look for online shops. And so sometimes there can be 20 or 30, sort of like it's 6 on average, but sometimes there can be 30 or 40 contact points. And I'm going to challenge the proposal of the initial merchant that I consulted with the proposals of other merchants. And we know that it's between 4 to 6 e-commerce sites that I'm going to consult, and I'm going to go by intermediaries like YouTube, or look at an inspiring video, or like a map, for example, to go see where I have to go, etc. So this is important. The customer experience is fundamental in the capacity to capture the customer. And then we're going to have all these different touch points, and where I'm going to have to provide an answer. I'm giving you the example of Google Maps or YouTube, but it's important for that the content that you deliver on your site has to be exceptional in order to make the customers increase customer loyalty, because they can. But what's also very important is to consider and to understand that the customer is going to go onto other platforms looking for information. And that's my third point. And I think it's important that we talk about that as well. We talk about multi-channel or omni-channel when you talk around, you talk in your environment, but if you talk in your family, do you have do you have a multi-channel customer? And they'll look at you and sort of like, oh, what the hell are you talking about? I've got customers, I've got desires, but I'm not a multi-channel or an omni-channel customer. So this is a sort of like a catch-all term, and the reality is a lot more varied than that. An omni-channel customer is somebody who's looking for inspiration before going to a shop, so they go onto the different platforms, and then for inspirational content, which is video. That's one of the elements of multi-channel or omni-channel. But then you go in, you look at a map to find a shop, and then you go afterwards then onto a site. So the definition of omni-channel doesn't really exist, because it's a sum of different tasks and activities and needs and expectations that a customer has, and which the customer is going to satisfy by consulting different platforms. Because this is where it's complex, because for a merchant, they've got to put themselves in the customer's shoes or the client's shoes, and they understand where this customer goes. And it'd be too easy to sort of like say, well, I've got the multi-channel approach response. There isn't one size fits all for omni-channel. There's there's a great variety of answers. And when we're talking about the diversity and richness of these contact points and the different moments during this purchasing experience, what can we do to make this experience a game changer and to influence the choice in order to make these to attract and make these customers loyal? And what are the subtle things that enable us to manage to get rid of these snags or irritating factors? I call them snags. What are the snags that the customer encounters today that we can get rid of tomorrow in order to give a fluid customer experience? So one of the major snags is the fact that you're not present where the customer is looking for a product or for a merchant. I'll just to give you a tangible example here. Not to be present on Google Maps with your shop, with the information about the opening times. That's a major irritating factor or a snag, because the customer sort of like goes, I want to buy this product in this shop because I remember this merchant. I talked about it 3 weeks ago. And if you can't find the information straight away on the platform where you normally look, this is the major irritating factor. Sort of like the first error is not being present. That's true. And then afterwards, then the second irritating factor is the quality of the information. When I go on to one of these platforms, the information which is proposed, is it exact? Is it correct? You're exactly the same. Sort of like, for example, when the opening hours aren't up to date, it's a really irritating. So you've got to understand as well that in the customer's mind, bad information or bad content means that you're going to have a bad experience. And if you come back to what I said, if the experience is bad, then the customer is not going to come back. Maybe they'll come once, but they'll never come back again afterwards. Absolutely. And then when we talk about the product, looking for information on the product, the first example that you've given of the iPhone, for example, if I'm looking for an iPhone and I find an offer within Google Shopping, for example, and how does this, what's the type of irritating factors or snags that I can find as a consumer? And are they the same type that I could find in in a real boutique? Okay, well, customer product information, but I think that most merchants have made a lot of progress in the way in which they have their product information. Either they have it on their e-commerce site and then they're able to export it onto different platforms. And if we talk about multi-channel, then the important point is to be able to, is it available in stock or not? And if it's available, then how much time, when can I get it? Because sometimes it's not always available straight away. So that's another irritating factor of available information. And is it relevant information? I know that the product is available, but I want to make sure, is it available now, tomorrow, or next week? So how does this information, how could we, I'm just going to summarize what we've just said. At a particular place with a lot of traffic, with a lot of expectations of consumers, how can we have reliable and rich, detailed product information about where can I get the product that I'm interested in with the stock, whether it's online or whether directly in a boutique A or B or C. So now if we're going to talk about payment, there's also a certain number of snags in boutique as well, I imagine. And how can we remove these snags or irritating factors? I think this is, sort of like everybody hates going to the cash register. We all try to avoid it because you have to queue up, and I think that's why retailers are trying to think about how to reduce the time that you spend at the when you're paying. How can we shorten this? How can we shorten the purchase and to go directly to the customer? I think there's a lot of retailers who go to the customer directly, and if you, for example, they go directly to you when you're buying a pair of shoes, that's a really pleasant experience, and why parallel you can buy something in e-commerce because it's not in stock. And I think all of this synergy with the customer means that you can improve the experience. And e-commerce innovated quite a lot in terms of you can pay in several installments. And I think in the future we're going to have this we're going to be able to transpose this experience, because the customer's not going to understand why it's different between in a real boutique and an online boutique. They want to be able to do exactly the same things in the various channels so that the purchasing experience is as pleasant as possible. Yeah, so through the various channels, the mechanisms need to be the same. But I expect to have the same value proposition. It doesn't matter where I am because I don't understand today, and it's quite normal that a brand is offering me an experience A in one place and experience B in another. When we're talking in payment and by installments, which is in physical boutiques, is it something that's active on the other digital channels? Because I presume there's a great variety of channels, and you can have sale, which is directly by telephone as well. So the other channels, apart from Office, can you harmonize the payment methods? In country by country, you can see that each country has its own ways of buying things. There are different habits. So there's a big emergence of pay by installment in France, but you can see that each country is different and has its own logic. And you've got to realize now that, sort of like with internet, that the borders don't stop in France, and you've got to take each customer and their expectations and each country into account, and you've got to go directly to the customer because they've got different in travel as well. We've had this harmonization of processes, and I think retail is going to have to think about this. Why should you have a different experience in Italy or in France? It's got to be a single, unique experience. And a customer who changes country today, they've got to have the same purchasing experience. And it's a good way of boosting customer loyalty. Thank you very much to both of you. So we can start with the second question, which is what simple tools or hints could you share with our commerces, which are SMEs, in order to simplify all of this, in order to distribute this in all the various channels? Right. Well, I think that you've got to have the proper tools. You've got to have omni-channel tools. We differentiate various solutions. It's not because you've got a multi-channel solution that all the customer's experience is going to be perfect. Sometimes you just aggregate data. When you pay on e-commerce, when you look at the data, when you know where a shop is located, so you know roughly where the customer's from. When it's online buying, you've got the postal addresses, and you can sometimes aggregate data between the boutique locations and also where the customers are buying. So you can sort of like you can give them customers ideas about where to open shops. So these is data that merchants already have, but that they don't necessarily look at it. They don't imagine the potential it has, potential for using it. And to aggregate it and to show it in a different way, and to have pre-prepared reports, gives them ideas and enables them to recognize their customers and to potentialize data. And so to use solutions which mechanically enable us to aggregate data without making additional effort. And when we talk about payment and sort of like payment history of a consumer with this capacity of aggregation? Is this something that's expected by customers? Yeah, uh, the customer expects to be treated well, to be made loyal, to be acknowledged, and so technology enables us just to recognize them with a credit card. I've already seen this customer before in an e-boutique or an e-commerce, and so you can find the purchases via the credit card. So that could be a way, in fact, of associating with the loyalty card. And some merchants are already doing it, that they've got the ID of the customer connected to the credit card. So you could imagine tomorrow you can, if the customer wants to register their credit card, you can debit them from the loyalty card. And I think this is what customers are expecting, but now it depends on the merchant to adapt and to try to propose these various purchasing experiences. Thank you very much, Pierre. And what about you, Francois? What advice would you give to SMEs in order to unify and harmonize these issues? I think the word that can sometimes upset SMEs is the word unify. I don't have all the data that I need. We're talking about unify, etc. Even if, like you said, Pierre, it's very important to be able to use the marketing tools involved. My advice would be to have a simple approach, like we said, that there's customer pathways which goes via different contact points, and for an SME with respect to the product that I'm selling, to have various hypotheses or analyses, which are the principal or main platforms that my customers go to, or that my customers are on. And to say, for example, if I'm selling fashion products, so people are going to look for inspiration. So it's probable that they're going to go onto social media or onto YouTube because there's a lot more content. And 60% of people explain that they saw content on YouTube which gave them the idea of buying a product, for example. So YouTube is going to be considered. Now, with respect to another SME, it's going to be a local merchant, and they know, of course, that they know that the customer is going to be on Google Maps because this is an entry point, a major entry point for the market. It could be a repair center or whatever. So to identify these platforms, and from there, say, you can have the idea of saying that I'm present in each one of these platforms, and how am I going to have an audit? I'm present, and secondly, all these platforms have interfaces, user interfaces, which enables us that you can already start working on the data and make them available to the platforms. And then afterwards, once I've identified the data on these platforms and worked on the quality of this data, that's extremely important, because today, one of the major issues and challenges is the lack of quality, and this is what Pierre was saying as well. And this enables me to have omnichannel on all these platforms. So thank you very much to all of you, your inside information. So if I can summarize this too, there's the quality of the data, and in order to be able to exploit them and use multi-channel solutions, which enables us to use this data through all the channels. So I'm going to get you now to the third question, to sort of like to jump towards a near future. Just to remind you, sort of like physical commerce, which is still 87% of retail, so digital, even if it's growing year by year, is still only 13%. But in this 13%, there's a lot of different channels, social media, search markets or search engines or marketplaces. As you've been able to see it, there's been a huge progress of marketplaces in these channels. So if you project yourselves into 1 to 5 years in the future, maybe it's very far. What are the trends? How can they develop? What the off and on, for example, are the really channels that can emerge, or can they play a major role? Sort of like, I'm not a clairvoyant, I don't have a crystal ball, but I think it's the customers who are going to define where they want to go. I think all the channels will remain. I think there's going to be balance out over time. in any case, it's going to balance out and harmonizing of customer experience, more fluid, to have more fluid payment mechanisms. And the ones who are going to remain on the market are the ones who paid attention to making the customer experience as easy as possible, because the customer the customer is not going to choose a more complicated option. They're going to go because they thought it was fluid, it was easy, it was pleasant, and the channels that are going to work more on this are going to gain more market share. I think, first of all, it's very difficult to predict things today, even more than yesterday. We're in a world where uncertainty reigns and is growing, and it's not going to stop. So it's a little bit complicated today, especially when you see whether you see big or small merchants today. The 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 main word here is to measure in real time the behavioral trends and to be able to react quickly, rather than be, sort of like make predictions and forecasts over the next 5 years, which can be false. But now, if you look at the details and the trends which are emerging at the moment, there once again, there hasn't been a revolution. There's just been an acceleration. The first acceleration was, of course, everything which is inspirational. And when I start looking for information, and video is a vector which works more and more, because YouTube is a search engine. It's the second search engine in the world, because the people come looking for information on YouTube. And in particular, the younger generations start on YouTube before they go on to search engines. And not just for inspiration, but, sort of like, if I have to repair a tap, I'm going to go and look for a tutorial on YouTube, which is going to say you've got to buy this product or this spanner. And, for example, or I don't know if you use and this is where I get the information, and I'm directed towards which products to buy. So through video, and we have a model in each country, perhaps in Asia, where there's live commerce, I don't know. But in any case, video support in terms of content is content in which SMEs have to invest, because this is where people consume information today. The second trend is the fact, like you were saying, that the shop is going to be a place where people are still going to meet up, they're still going to discuss, they're going to have services. So the shop or the boutique is still going to be essential in the omni-channel pathway. And then the third question is more about the notion of marketplace. You've got to wonder again why marketplace is succeeding at the moment. And one of the essential elements is because you were talking about friction and snags earlier, because how can I get my product quickly? And when you go to a marketplace, you've got an infinite choice, which gives you these answers quickly. So it's really by, comfort rather than being an experience in itself. And it's interesting to see, because in marketplace, like I was saying, I'm always going to have the same experience. It doesn't matter where I am, because once I have the experience of one marketplace, and I'll put it in the top of my list in terms of experiences. So it's, like it's a positive circle. Sort of like they respond to my initial expectations, and so I keep going back. And marketplaces, sort of like, and this is a bit like doing the same role as the same promises that were made by supermarkets and hypermarkets that were made in the 60s and 70s. Everything under the one roof, and this is the case of a market case, but it's a more virtual roof today. And this is where social media have an approach, have a social approach to shopping, and this promise of having everything under the one roof in a format and an experience which is different, more inspirational, like you've just been saying, and which has a promising future ahead of it. Well, thank you very much. I think we've got to the end of this roundtable. And thank you very much for all these insights. Thank you very much for having shared them with all of us. And then sort of like now we're going to make space now for the next roundtable. So thank you very much to both of you.